They didn't want to
So
take any
it's
chances.
7:30, let's
with,
call the Scituate Planning Board meeting for Thursday, July 10th, 2014 into order. I need a motion on the agenda.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is an application for CPC for Vinyl Ave. And it's a path. Val, Jen, tell us what you want to do.
Hello. Thank you so much for having us come and do a brief presentation. I know that you have a lot to get to tonight. I am Jen Gagan and this is Val Baker. We are here representing the Jenkins School Council as members, and we're basically looking to do a brief presentation of the pathway that we're hoping to get on Vinyl Avenue where the front of Jenkins School is, so that we're looking basically for support from various town boards. So that's why we're here today. I'll start by saying that I personally joined the Jenkins School Council this past year in September of 2013 and participated in putting together our Jenkins School Culture Goal, which you can see up here. At Jenkins School, we foster and promote a safe and supportive school environment. We have 3 primary focus areas: safety, social responsibility, and technology. With regard to safety, we had a lot of discussion around arrival and dismissal concerns. Both Vinyl Avenue and First Parish Road have challenges surrounding arrival and dismissal. And following many discussions about how, as a council, we might be able to affect change, we decided that we believed improving access to and from school for pedestrians is pertinent to our goal. This is a current image of Vinyl Avenue coming off of Stockbridge Street, and I wanted to give you this picture because it shows you that there are no sidewalks on either side of the street. There's minimal yard space for pedestrians traveling to school or away from school, and it is currently a 2-way street. As you can see, not really from this picture because my son is the only person that's walking to school since it was raining, but as kids are going to and from school, walkers end up on both sides of the street, because obviously you're trying to walk on the left where cars will be able to see you, so they end up where my son is heading to school and then coming back the other way. So you add the buses, the cars, you can see kind of how congested it really does get, and it really does make things more dangerous. I like this image because it just gives you a better idea of just how tight the street is when 2 buses are passing, which is frequent when they're coming to school or picking children up. They have minimal space to move to the side, to allow for pedestrians to have a little extra space. And I mean, 2 people walking at a time, that's very small. When the weather is nice, it can be upwards of almost 10, 15 children and adults at the same time. And as my caption says, imagine adding snow and seeing what that is like for trying to get to school. So as part of our tasks for the Jenkins School Council, we were asked this past spring to review the Scituate Public Schools Elementary Handbook. And in doing so, I actually found a couple of things that I think reflect and work well with our in our search for trying to get a pathway brought to Vinyl Avenue. One of those is the Safe Routes to School section in the handbook. It says the school district will assess and, if necessary and to the extent possible, make needed improvements to make it safer and easier for students to walk and bike to school. When appropriate, the district will work together with local public works, public safety, and/or police departments in those efforts. So felt like that would kind of further highlighted the rationale for supporting our pathway project and ties it in between the school and different parts of town. I also found something else in the handbook: the use of school facilities outside of school hours. School spaces and facilities will be available to students, staff, and community members before, during, and after the school day, on weekends, and during school vacations to offer physical activity. I felt this also helps to connect to our goal of gaining the pathway, and I'll kind of piece that together later as I move further in the presentation. A little bit more documented support that Val and I stumbled upon as we were doing research for the pathway is something that I think some of you on this committee are familiar with, It's the 2007 Scituate Sidewalk Study, which was obviously put together by various town officials and local contributors. Was presented to the Board of Selectmen in April of 2007. They essentially had 3 tasks. One was to create an inventory of existing sidewalks. The second was identify areas where new sidewalks would improve pedestrian access and safety. They took into consideration things such as key pedestrian destinations in the town of Scituate, so the 6 schools, the 3 town centers, the 2 public transportation hubs, the library, 7 ball fields, and the 6 playgrounds. The third task was to recommend a method for setting priorities for building new sidewalks, and they looked at kind of 3 different things that they were using as a rating system, and it was routes, service, and safety. Routes refers to the fact that walkers have destinations that they use to try and get places, so they looked at the destinations, the routes they used, and then identifying the gaps in that pathway or those series of pathways. The service referred to fixing the gaps in the routes, serving the greatest number of residents. And the last part, safety, concentrated first on the routes with the greatest danger to pedestrians. Some of the statistics that are specific to Vinyl Avenue from the study were the following: that the pathway would complete the connection between Kent Street and Stockbridge Road. The length in feet is 1,600. The number of homes that served, they approximated at 87. The traffic speed and volume rate, as part of that rating system, they gave it a 4. And then my own current estimation of potential walkers that go to Jenkins is about 60. And these are the Scituate Sidewalk Study results. The study results were presented and accepted by the selectmen 7 years ago. Vinyl Avenue is on the top 10 streets designated as a priority for needing a sidewalk. And the Safe Routes to School funding for sidewalks in Scituate has been exhausted, as you're only allowed 1 grant per community, and that was previously used. So in kind of gathering all this and looking at this information, we realized, while it's time for action, what exactly could we do about it, especially as a council? So school committee needed to consider how to fund and acquire the pathway that we desired to have on the street. So we started looking into alternative funding options, and at some point along the fall, I had learned about the Tilden Multipurpose Trail that you all might be aware of, and did a little digging and found out that they had been able to use the Community Preservation Committee. Scituate's Community Preservation Fund is funded by 3% surcharge on local real estate taxes and generous matching funds from the Commonwealth. So we thought this might work for our situation. Did some more digging and realized that there's a section under the CPC called the Community Preservation Act, which is actually what you use as part of your application. And the criteria that we decided fit best with us would be recreation. Recreational use is defined to include active or passive recreational use, including but not limited to the following: community gardens, trails or pathways, which is our section, non-commercial youth and adult sports, parks, playgrounds, and athletic fields. And this is where I felt like I found that tie-in to the school handbook that said that the school is a place that can be used by the community during non-school hours for recreational purposes. So I thought this was a nice tie-in to the criteria for the CPA. The Jenkins School Council actions thus far are that we have submitted an application of eligibility to the Community Preservation Committee under the criteria of recreation. The CPC did accept our application on May 12th. We've gone about starting to garner neighborhood support. We've gone door to door to every house on the street, and also dropped letters kind of giving a description of what we're hoping to bring to the street, and letting people know that if they have questions, there's a place of contact for that. We've collaborated with the DPW and received a cost estimation of the proposed pathway. And we have started and are continuing to do presentations to various community groups such as yourselves. Wanted to also take a moment and highlight some of the community advantages to people, not just children that are trying to get to and from the school or residents that are trying to use the school. if we were to gather this pathway to go between Kent Street and Stockbridge Road, it would provide easy and safe walking access to the Jenkins School, obviously, including the playground and fields. It would provide a new walking path to Front Street, the Driftway Trail, Peggotty Beach, the lighthouse, as far as you want it to go. And it also provides a new walking path to the post office, the library, the town hall. Just provides another connection and option for people. Current pathway supporters are the Department of Public Works, Community Preservation Committee, Traffic Rules and Regulations Committee, School Committee, and to date 15 Vinyl Avenue residents. And we would love the support of the planning board. Any questions?
Any questions from the board?
Do you have a preliminary figure?
We do. It would be $450,000.
And it would be on both sides of the street? One side of the street?
The final determination for that would be with the DPW, but because there are several spots on this street where the telephone poles switch side to side, so the sidewalk might need to switch sides as you go up or down, but it would not be two sidewalks, one on one side and one on the other.
When the DPW looked at this, I assume they looked at the right-of-way relative to where the pavement is now, and there's sufficient land that is not now paved that you could fit a sidewalk.
Yes, they do feel so, and also interestingly, when we were at the Traffic Rules and Regulations Committee meeting, that group talked about, and some of the people that are on that committee are also involved with the DPW, mentioned the possible idea as well of making that road one-way, which would also allow much more access for a sidewalk.
Sure.
Because you would need less road space. So
Right.
that's another option that they were kind of talking about. So I think you have some choices.
It's interesting that three sides of Jenkins, the roads bordering three sides of Jenkins have sidewalks. This is the only one that does not.
And interestingly, when the Jenkins School was proposed, the Godders, who lived 2 doors down from the present school, had come to the selectmen's meeting and said, we're putting up a school on Vinyl Ave, put a sidewalk in when the school goes up.
Mhm.
I mean, and it should have been done. It should
Yeah.
have been done then. And as you can see, it is the bus route. The First Parish Road side is not the official front door. I mean, I
Right.
think people don't, the public does not conceive of the fact that the school spans a block.
Hmm.
The back is on one street, the front is on another. So, except for residents and people who would like to walk, they don't realize all the congestion that can occur on that street
Right.
with the bus routes. Because the First Parish Road side is the car drop-off.
Mhm.
And I know that the police chief has had several meetings trying to remediate in some way the issues that naturally occur for the school the size it is. I mean,
Sure.
the enrollment will be down slightly, but 650 children.
Yep.
It's hard, and as Jen said, we're encouraging healthy lifestyles. People now, Jen is a one-car family. She walks no
Yeah,
matter what
every
the
day.
weather is. My grandchildren, well, they have finished at Jenkins now, but they walked every day as well. I mean, they had their LL Bean raincoats, and no matter what, you want. But it's far more healthy, and it would be, there are older residents on the street that were very excited about this, saying, great, I can walk to the harbor safely
Yeah.
if there is such a thing. I mean, all of those streets, Meeting House, Greenfield, all of those streets really should have safe connectors from Stockbridge down to Kent.
Mhm.
Jen, you had mentioned that there was already a current grant for the safe route to schools. Was that the Stockbridge sidewalk or no?
Atherley
No.
School.
That was
Yeah.
Hatherley?
Mhm.
Okay. 'Cause I know the Stockbridge one went in, was it 2 years ago? Is that right?
It did, and that, yes, it did, but, and
They talked at the time about like spilling the asphalt around the
Around.
corner, right where the people are walking there, and bringing it at least up to the school.
school.
But apparently, according to the DPW, it wasn't written that way. So if it's not, you can't change the way that it's put
conduit.
forth.
Yeah.
So why it ends at Bierce Road, and and doesn't really connect all the way to
all the way to
the Green Bush
Countryway.
area, yeah. I'm not sure, why you wouldn't just stop it at Linda Lane and take the rest of it and at least get kids to school on one part of the street. I'm not sure, but
Well, I think from what I remember
Mhm.
was that there was a goal to have, like, that was like phase 2, was to extend it up to the Greenbush area.
okay.
That's what I remember hearing. I don't know if that's correct or not. But that's why they did it in phases. I think they
Okay.
had to stop there at Pierce Lane. But, well, I applaud you for your presentation. Very well done, very thought out.
Thank you
My
for helping me
first-
hook it up.
Yeah, my first thought was, I'm a little concerned about CPC funds being used for sidewalks, but you've clearly made a case that it's not just a sidewalk, that it's connecting, assets within our town, such as the harbor and the, even the Driftway area and Stockbridge Road. So I think that I can see a little bit more the case being made for a public pathway as opposed to just a sidewalk. So that very good research and good planning on your part.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah, well, I would echo the same thing, although I would say that it's tied more into the use of the school as a recreational activity than anything else, because those other parallel streets, I'm not sure I would say we should fund every sidewalk in the town out of the CPC money. So, is there any objection on any of the residents' part to?
I had one resident say no because, and this was the rationale, because if there was a sidewalk, and it's not even guaranteed that it would be on this person's side of the street. If there was a sidewalk that went in front of their house, people could see right into their windows.
That was the only,
Yeah, that was the only one.
Anything else?
No, I think it's a fine idea.
Yeah.
It received support from CPC. In other words, it ends up, it's not a done deal. It's got to go through the
right.
Yep.
CPC process on it. But what CPC had asked for is to go out and gather support and identify any issues or any questions that you had. So when you did come in with your formal application, then there would no surprises on it. I think that's what they're in the process of doing now. So they would be looking for support from us as a support for the project, not necessarily this project versus another project,
Right.
but it's a support for this project so they can go forward.
Would this be a project that is done next summer or something?
It would be later than that.
I think it would be later than that, yeah.
2 years from now?
Because there's the Tilden Trail, and then there is something on Country Way.
Yeah, I think that's up to the CPC to decide, but I believe we have to get our final application in by November of 2014.
Well, to have it funded at next annual
Right,
town meeting.
right, to have it, yeah, 'cause
But
obviously
in
it
terms
gets
of when
talked
the
about.
construction would be,
Further out.
I think it's a couple of years out.
Well, and I think it's also good that it's kind of a grassroots effort that you've gone and spoken to all the people along Vinyl Ave, so that it's not coming from the town, it's actually coming from the residents, and I think that looks very positive. I know CPC has done that in the past with the Tilden Trail, and that seemed to get very good response. So I think it's a good approach.
Just a thought here, was there any discussion about rerouting foot traffic to use the existing sidewalks and come in the other way on First Parish?
They can, but the same, when people are coming from the upper end of Stockbridge Road, to have to bypass the street
That the school is on. you
that
have
the
to go to
school is
back.
on,
Go down the
to
down
go
the hill.
down First Parish, and then,
Cross another street
Right.
without a crossing guard to get
Right.
onto First Parish.
right.
Put you at 2 more intersections.
Yeah,
Plus, like I said, not that it's that much for kids, but it's kind of down the hill, then up the street, then back up the hill again, so.
Splashing in the puddles, singing all the way.
Yeah,
Young legs.
exactly.
I mean, there are people that walk both ways. I mean, my family can actually go all the way up First Parish and come in the backside of the school, or a different route and come in on Vinyl. So, I mean, it is used, both doors are accessible, but we just felt like it would be really important to have the front entrance of the school have a safe walking path. And I like the idea too that it does, as I said, I wouldn't personally just use the path just for school. It's another connection to get you to town. And from my house, I would use it. It saves me a little time from having to go a little further up First Parish. So I know it seems heavy on the school side because we're coming from the Jenkins School Council, but it really does benefit the community as a whole.
Any questions from the public? Do we have a motion from the motion here?
I don't know, I would certainly support it. Does everyone else feel that way?
Yeah.
Is there a motion?
You're gonna move?
No, we didn't
Move
make a motion
to-
for this,
Oh.
because really didn't know how you would.
Okay, well, I move that we have, are you looking for a letter from the planning board?
Yes, please. That would be wonderful.
Okay, that the planning board, Bill, as chairman, write a letter in support of the pathway that has been presented here for Vinyl Ave.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.
All right, now I just have to figure out how to turn this off.
Now that you got it all hooked up, have you figured out how to unhook it?
This is true.
How to turn the projector.
Yeah.
Well, maybe just a quick
Maybe
Yeah,
I'll
help us.
Well, I'll just turn it all off, I think, and then we can unplug
If you
everything.
give me the remote, I can turn it
Oh.
off.
Chart in the
maybe.
ones that they did.
This says agenda Thursday.
So just hit the power button,
Computer?
press it again,
This is the average.
I got it.
and the fan will be on for a few minutes to cool it down, and then it'll shut off
Great.
automatically.
Sense.
Great.
It's just a visual.
Yeah, I think that was it. Okay.
We thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, I know, so appreciated.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for all your
Thank
hard work. I look forward to bypassing the Driftway Trail one day and going down that path.
Excellent.
When I walk up Meeting House, which is not right now with all the thing, with it all dug up, I really wish that had one as well.
I have I'm always asking all these tangential questions. How did that road get its name? Who is Ann Vinyl?
Oh,
Vinyl.
It's vinyl. Oh, there's a.
Because there's also an Ann Vinyl.
Right, no, she was one of the
different place.
founders of the
You
town.
can find them.
But so it's named after a family from town.
Yeah,
That's what
no,
it's.
she was an important personage in the town in the 1800s, early 1800s.
So both streets are named after that family, just different names, or is that completely different?
I don't know that.
But that is your homework.
Why,
like to
why is
have
it
the
all
answer.
Tilden Road, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Turns into.
For Sam Tilden, that's why.
Yeah,
Everybody knows Sam.
thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome, thank you. A couple minutes before 8. We can, want to do something before that, or should we just put Ann up?
Yep,
She's
Yeah,
Sure.
Ann is here.
go right into it.
She's on the
So
hot
the next
seat.
item on the agenda is discussion on the Massachusetts zoning reform bill. And Ann is our representative on MAPC.
Thank you. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Great, thank you. Same turn.
Thank you. I am Ann Burbine, Chairman of the South Shore Coalition, and with me this evening is Eric Cove from MAPC to talk to you about Massachusetts zoning reform. And this is the first time in, 35 to 40 years that that it has actually gone into committee. It's still sitting there, but it's, it's making progress. And Eric knows way more about this than I do, so I am going to turn it over to him.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me down here. Again, my name is Eric Hope. I'm with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. Over the years, the state zoning, planning, subdivision laws really have not been seriously overhauled in close to 40 years. So, and there's been a number of different attempts in the meantime to update these planning and zoning statutes that really haven't gained a lot of traction. About a year ago, Representative Kulik and Senator Wolf basically asked us to sit down with the MMA, the Smart Growth Alliance, and really try to figure out, a more streamlined bill. The last version was about a 140-page piece of legislation. As you know, zoning is complicated. It's hard to translate into layperson's terms and common English. So we basically really tried to boil down what are some of those key reforms that will really make a difference, that will give cities and towns additional powers that are enjoyed by just about every other state in the nation. I know we like to do things differently here in Massachusetts, but in terms of our planning and zoning, we seem to make it as hard as possible and as contentious as possible. So really, this legislation is trying to do three main things. One is to grant cities and towns additional powers to basically make it easier to develop that vision for how you want your community to be, and then to put the tools in place to actually help with zoning to actually realize that vision. Secondly, there's so much unpredictability in our development processes that we have. So many permits are discretionary. You can go in, put a lot of money into your project, and you just have no idea at the end of the day if you're even going to get that permit, if you're going to get your project built. So we want to introduce more transparency and more predictability into that process. And part of the reforms that come in with this is giving cities and towns tools like development impact fees, so project proponents will know up front what kind of fees they're looking for, and the hope is that by providing that additional transparency to developers, that it gives cities and towns more comfort and more willingness to do more planning by right. And finally, as a regional planning agency, we're really focused on overall regional land use outcomes. We want to make it easier to do the right kind of projects, where you want to see more investment in your downtowns, your village centers, places that already have infrastructure. That I think is a good segue, the presentation before, talking about making walkable, healthy communities. That's something that my agency is a strong proponent of, and the tools in here I think will help cities and towns accomplish their vision for growth. And I think the other thing that we're obviously concerned about is environmental degradation. So much of our land use, we use land inefficiently. Just the most recent figures from Mass Audubon is we're consuming about 13 acres a day of open space, whether it's farmland, forest land, and basically converting that into essentially lower density residential development. So we want to make it as easy as possible for developers that want to do mixed use, that want to reinvest in cities and villages, to know that's where it's at, and that make it easy to do those types of projects. So that's really the goals of the legislation. I'll hit a couple of things in here. There's still a lot, even as a streamlined bill, there's still actually a lot in here. So I just wanted to kind of selectively pull out a couple of the major ones that I think you may find interesting. And just wanted to, before I do that, just wanted to tell you where the legislation's at today. Back in March, it did have a hearing and was passed out of the Joint Committee on Municipalities and Regional Government. They gave it a favorable reporting, made a few modest changes to what's in the legislation that we support almost everything they did. And I think this time around, we've really been able to build a really diverse amount of support behind it. You have the environmental community, the planning community, many local officials and planners and planning board members. And I think really interestingly, again, makes me think about it, seeing the presentation of walkability before on sidewalks, is the public health community has really come out as strong proponents, because anything that will encourage more walking, making those connections, making it safer for bike riders and pedestrians. So they've actually become a real ally in this as well. The legislation does have 58 co-sponsors. Right now it's at House Ways and Means. We are running against a tight clock that's ticking down. I think we have about 20 days left in the session. We hear it's a priority, but with 20 days, it's not a lot of time. So we're hopeful that something will happen this year on it. At least pieces of this will move. But right now we definitely do have kind of the ticking clock where there's still a lot I think the State House wants to accomplish, and time is getting short in July.
When you say pieces, it's a single bill.
It's a single bill.
Yeah, okay, so.
Yeah, but who knows what will happen in the committee, whether they
right.
take certain things out and push that or
Sure.
not. Obviously, it's our desire to see all of it move forward. Just a couple things I want to pull out as highlights. One of the tough things that I'm sure you all experience is it's hard to change your zoning. Makes sense that it's hard because it really makes a difference in terms of what's allowed. It's really the DNA for what your community becomes. But there's also been so many zoning votes for rezoning that fail by 1, 2, 3 votes because you need that 2/3 majority, which is so hard. So one of the components in here would, as a local option, allow cities and towns to drop that zoning vote quantum to as low as a simple majority. And that's something I wanted to highlight here is much of the additional powers and tools in the legislation, it is at a local option. So if it makes sense for Scituate to adopt, say, the zoning vote at a lesser majority, that's something that you can do. If Scituate feels happy and comfortable with the way it's currently done, there'd be no requirement to change it. So a lot of the provisions in here really are local options, so it's up to, if it makes sense with local circumstances, to move forward with them. Something else that has been a problem, especially during the Great Recession, was you'd go through the permitting process and get your permit with lots of investment, lots of time, but then the financing, it doesn't come together in time. You need to come back, and I know there was at least 1 or 2 permit extensions legislation that was statewide, but this would basically extend the time once you have a permit in hand for building permits, special permits, and subdivision plans, to basically say for building permits, once you get it, I think today it's a 6-month permit. It would extend it up to 2 years before you'd have to come back and reapply for it. And special permits today is a maximum of 2 years. This would set it at 3 years. And then a big change on subdivisions is how they're vested. Something that's really been a big thorn in the side of a lot of municipalities. If they're interested in changing zoning, a property owner can put a preliminary plan in with almost no investment, no real forethought, and basically freeze the zoning on that land for 8 years. This changes the timing and would change it to you actually have to file your definitive subdivision plan prior to the first notice of a zoning change. So it basically would prevent that kind of knee-jerk reaction to a proposed zoning change. But if you do your definitive plan, you get your subdivision approval, you would still have that 8-year vesting or grandfathering of locking in that zoning. A couple other things I wanted to highlight before we ask for any questions that you may have or discussion is right now on the approval not required subdivision process has been a real problem in terms of today there's almost no regulatory oversight at the municipal level for those A&R subdivisions. This again, as a local option, would give cities and towns the ability to substitute an A&R process for a minor subdivision. This is again a common process in most of the other states, but for basically small subdivisions up to 6 units, it would require a streamlined subdivision process, but it would give planning boards more oversight in terms of taking a look at the overall site design, site layout, drainage, the kind of things today that obviously make a big difference for the functionality of a development, but at the same time can't really be looked at under today's A&R standards. And the last thing I wanted to pull out for your attention is on the back side of the one-pager. It's called the Planning Ahead for Growth. And again, this is we call it the opt-in section. But it basically asks for cities and towns that are interested to take 4 zoning actions. The biggest is to do a by right residential development district. The second would be to do an economic development district that, again, would allow projects as of right. And that one's an easier lift. Many communities already have adopted 43D expedited permitting districts. That would qualify as doing the economic development standard. The third would have an open space residential development requirement for areas that require more than an acre per dwelling unit, that those projects would need to cluster the houses on smaller amounts of land and then set aside the remaining land as protected open space. And then finally, the last one is a water feature basically called low impact development, which basically asks projects to treat stormwater runoff on site as opposed to pushing it off onto adjacent properties. So if a community would be interested in doing those 4 zoning changes, they would then basically qualify for additional incentives in terms of priority for state infrastructure investments, state grants. The subdivision vesting would actually drop to 5 years from 8 years. And it also would allow what we call natural resource protection zoning, basically very large lot zoning. So if there was major agricultural lands that you could actually say down zone that area for 1 unit for say 5 acres, which we really can't do today. So that's kind of the bill in a nutshell. There are many things we didn't get to yet, but I'm happy to answer any questions and happy to be here.
Laura, you want to add anything before we for questions?
Sure. I think the change in the Form A plans is one of the more attractive pieces of this that I think we've had a lot of experience with. For instance, maybe it was before some of you were on the board, but along Route 3A opposite Doctors Hill going further down towards the reservoir, there's a piece of land which it has a nice Sotheby's for sale sign right now.
Oh, yeah, the one by, is it Ford? What's the street that goes right?
Old Forge.
Old
Forge,
Forge, yeah,
thank you.
it's
Now I said
kind
Ford.
of south of Old Forge.
Yes.
And that land wound up being developed through a common driveway, but the first idea was just to have 9 individual lots with driveways right off 3A with, really not much say for the town as far as, any kind of traffic impacts or safety. And it was a really long, torturous process to get to the common driveway. And through a lot of that process, the developer would, frequently say, oh, but I can get these 9 lots. So, just remember, I can do that, and there's nothing you can do about it, and so on. So, not that that's necessarily in itself a bad thing, but I think some of the value of this zoning reform is it's almost like a culture change where the planning board would have a little more say-so. You could still waive things, you could still do the same things that you're doing now, but you just have a little more, you'd be a little bit more in the driver's seat. One other cultural sort of change that I like about this Zoning Reform Act is a lot of attorneys, I think it's mandatory in Massachusetts, if you're going to go to a professional mediator, they have to be an attorney, but typically it's a kind of different type of relationship. It's more, the word that's coming to mind is confrontational, but it's a little more, it's not warm, it's not fuzzy, it's like, we want this, and, well, we've got to control that, and it doesn't lead to a great feeling when you're done. But one of the things that the Zoning Reform Act has in it is that there is a process for dispute resolution, which presumably would be by, professional mediators. So it would have like a little different feeling to it, instead of the kind of, really litigious, lawsuit-driven type of situation. I think you'd have, a little more opportunity for compromise and, kind of a little more of a push in that direction. So those are two of the things that I found appealing about it. There are a lot of other pieces to it. There's a piece where master plans would have a much stronger connection with zoning, I believe. I'm not sure if that's an option or if that's...
It's in there.
I know
It's
it's
there.
in there, but I'm not sure if it's, mandatory or it's an option that a town could elect. But anyway, there's an opportunity anyway to really use a master plan, and once you've gone through all this process of thinking about what should be zoned where and so on, if a zoning proposal came in and someone wanted to rezone, some isolated piece of land or 5 contiguous isolated pieces of land in a way that you really didn't like, if it didn't go with a master plan, I think they'd have a much harder time. They need a higher vote percentage, and, it would just be a different situation. So, that's my take on it.
The bill states that if local zoning is challenged in a lawsuit, and the judge finds that the challenged provision is consistent with the local master plan that has been certified by the applicable regional planning agency, then the provision shall be deemed to serve a public purpose. So in other words, they can't do it.
Yeah.
So, there are some really good aspects of this. And I remember years ago, a huge subdivision came to town, and according to the subdivision control law, I had wanted to have a certain portion of it put aside for recreation, for a playground or whatever. Couldn't do it. Under this, you can put up to 5% aside for a playground or a field. It can't go to a municipality. It would stay within the confines of the subdivision. But this is the first. It's a plus. There are some amenities in here that just make more sense than what we have been doing in the past. And really makes it far more simple, because it is very confusing, what we've been dealing with.
So help me understand, let's just assume positively that within 20 days we'll get a positive vote and it does pass. Then is the onus on us and the ZBA? Do we have to vote certain things in and say we're going to use this, we're not going to use that? What's the process look like?
For things that basically have statewide applicability, there is transition periods. So if there's anything in your current bylaw that would be out of conformance with the new law, you'd have a 3-year time period to make any updates for conformance. But in terms of all the local options, you could do it the next day, the next year, 10 years down the road. There's no time limits for adopting the new provisions. It's just whenever you are interested in doing it, you can start that process.
And would we have to vote as a board? I guess I'm kind of asking this to Laura as well. Would we, say some particular provision, would we have to vote that in as a board?
I think most of it would be through town meeting.
Town meeting, that's what I was wondering, okay.
I envision it following the same thing we do for a zoning change now.
Just go to town meeting.
Yeah, right now, for example, if you wanted to change the A&R Form A process and substitute that for a minor subdivision, that would be a planning board decision. But for something like changing the zoning vote or something that would require the town's legislative body's approval, then we're talking town meeting. So most of the cases would be town meeting votes.
So this is sort of a multi-step process where we have to go through the state legislature, and then once that's approved, then we have to go to the individual local municipalities and get their approval as well at town meeting.
For, for,
So
for
those
changes
things
you
that
want to
are-
adopt.
Exactly, for
Yeah.
those things that are specifically.
That's right.
Optional.
That's right.
That you'd like to adopt,
That's
yes.
right.
What are the things you have to adopt?
The changes in the permit lengths, so the 2, the 3, and the changes to, instead of using preliminary plans, subdivision plans to vest definitive, that would be an example of something that changes statewide the day the law goes into effect.
So is it limited to that, or are there multiple, like dozens of things like that in here?
No, there's not dozens. I believe there are more.
There's a change in the variance criteria.
Yeah.
Right now, you can't really get a variance legally
right.
very easily at all. I mean, it's really next to impossible, although occasionally it can happen.
Mhm.
And this would make the process, more viable, really. That doesn't mean that they have to be granted by a zoning board. A zoning board is still going to look at the public interest and, a lot of other kind of overarching goals, but they would have that ability if there were something, there's so many games that go on with zoning the way it is now. There's a lot of use of Section 6 findings, special permits for nonconforming uses where you can make a lot of changes in kind of a wholesale way without it necessarily always being completely transparent because, so much is going on that it's kind of hard to see the whole picture. And I think that making the variance process easier actually it's kind of counterintuitive, but I think it's actually a good thing to do to kind of make it more obvious what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and with variances, it's so hard to legally grant them today. Where this, I think, just introduces a lot more common sense. Where if you're going 6 inches into a setback, the neighbors aren't complaining about it. It's not shading their tomato plants. You can grant that variance. On the other hand, if it is having a detrimental impact on the neighbors, on the neighborhood, the ZBA could still obviously deny that. But it's just basically trying to introduce more common sense and more latitude, really, in terms of granting those, especially when they aren't going to derogate from the overall character of the neighborhood.
Another portion, the 2 changes to the subdivision control law, one that I had cited, parks and playgrounds, but also to subdivision roadway standards, which has always been an issue with the planning board. Many local subdivision regulations require unnecessarily stringent roadway standards. These may adversely affect aesthetics, increase stormwater runoff, and inflate housing costs by imposing undue burdens on the developer. The bill establishes a rebuttable presumption that roadway standards exceeding those applicable to the construction or reconstruction of publicly financed roadways are excessive, while defining a safe harbor for roadway widths up to 24 feet. So I think it makes some sense.
And the subdivision roadway standard, this one, there's been a lot of discussion about this one. On the one hand, you have like the environmental advocates that want to see, reduced pervious surface, reduced fragmentation, and you also have a lot of people in the development community that don't want to spend additional dollars on paving if they don't have to. So I think that's one where you have the development community and the environmental community actually in alignment on that question.
And one of the things that has been discussed as well, both in terms of zoning, et cetera, is having the preliminary discussion and bringing in members of all of the different departments prior to. I know that the planning board will have someone come in with an idea, to a preliminary plan. But if in some towns, they'll bring in the developer, planning board person, ZBA, everybody. And they all sit down and they all talk about it, what's good, what's bad, what's indifferent, so that the developer knows where he stands knows what's going to happen, what the adverse impacts may be, or the positives may be, and then it's not a waste of time, money and energy. As opposed to sometimes here, and I've known this from the past, you don't get the information until 2 days before the meeting. And it can be very, very frustrating. Meetings become continued. I mean, it's housekeeping, really, whether it's a necessary zoning change or not, to ensure that all of the ducks are in a row, that everything is expedited, because time is in fact money for both the developer and the consultants.
It's also, though, it's just not a frustration level. It's the fact that people don't all work at the same point in time, right? I mean, the planning members and the people who are here during the day aren't necessarily here at night, and we're not necessarily here during the day to sit into these kinds of meetings, So part of it is just the allocation of resources and time.
I understand that, but if the department heads all sat down at the same time with the developer and then reported back.
We do have a process now that, Bob knows about, where we do sit down as a group and discuss all the development that's current in town, but I have seen other towns that do that with the applicant there, or especially if it's a brand new site plan or that type of thing. Yeah. But I think that's maybe
It's
not
not in
something that
this.
would be regulated or
No.
affected.
Right.
That's something that would have to come from you all.
The special permits going from a supermajority to a simple majority, that would be a local option, or is that automatic?
That's a great question, and it's actually changed since the committee. The original version that was drafted basically automatically set it back to a simple majority, and then would allow the town to basically reset it back to a supermajority if they wanted to.
The opposite way.
But then at the municipalities committee, they changed that language to basically keep it as is today, but if you want to reduce it to a simple majority, you have that option. So that's the current status.
Because I think that's certainly impacted this board quite a bit, where one member is gone, and then that ends up being a continuation
Right.
because we need a supermajority, and the applicant wants to make sure that they have the right people, so.
Right?
What's the current use of development impact fees? Is that prevalent in the Commonwealth? I know it's not,
No.
that I know of.
My understanding is there are some communities that do it. Some are, I guess, willing to accept a certain amount of risk, and do it until they're challenged. But that's the majority of towns that do it have basically been enabled through special legislation to allow that. This would
State legislation, not their own.
Right,
Okay.
state legislation.
Yeah.
So right now it is very uncommon, and I think the typical process for most communities is to basically do that negotiation through a discretionary permit process. And again, that's can be long, can be painful, it can be unpredictable. So the idea is to get at what those costs and impacts are going to be up front, so the developer knows going in, at the beginning of the process, basically what those expected fees are going to be.
And if this bill passes, is that something that's a community option, or is that something that automatically?
Community option.
It is still a community option.
You basically need to do the study to establish, what those impacts would be.
Right.
So each town would need to do that if they want to take advantage of that provision.
More widespread outside Massachusetts, other states, Midwest,
Very common.
Southern.
Very
Yeah, right.
We are the only state that does the Form A. We have the unique distinction of that.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
It's a matter of opinion.
Sometimes it's okay to be unique.
We're one of the few commonwealths in the country,
Yeah.
right?
3?
Virginia?
I think there are 3. Pennsylvania?
With home rule.
All right, all right.
Well, I mean, certainly from the information you've presented, it sounds like a very positive impact.
Yeah, it does.
Are you looking for something from the board, or is
If
this just for information?
if the board is willing to go on record to support it, we would love
letter.
that support.
Letter of support or a call to your,
Should we draft a letter to our legislators?
yes, I think that's the best thing to do.
That'd be fantastic.
It would be wonderful.
Yeah, I think the way I've been kind of directed is that anything involving the legislators has to go through the corner
Through the-
office.
Okay,
So
through the manager's office.
if you want to maybe draft something to the selectmen, urging them or whatever, is there something else that a planning board can do that's
Well, personally, you
Not
could
directly.
each make a phone call as
making
a
phone
citizen.
calls?
Yeah, and again, I'm not sure exactly how the politics are in Scituate, but I mean, we, in the support letter, which is something that we handed out, we do have, on the page 5 there are planning boards that have gone on record as supporting it. So that may be an option where if the planning board has endorsed it, we could go on the support letter, or, I mean, whatever you're comfortable with, whatever your local process with. But we love your support as the bottom line.
Going on record wouldn't involve, like a letter to legislators or anything like that. So I don't know what people are feeling, but that sounds like that's something that could be done.
But I guess I'm not sure what, if everything's gonna go through through the town administrator, what that process is right now.
Well, I think it's just the contact with legislators.
So the letter would be written by us, signed by Trish?
Yeah, I guess you could do that, yeah. I mean, are you going to brief the Board of Selectmen also, or?
No, that was not the intent, but I suppose we could go before the Board of Selectmen. We can get on the agenda for the 22nd.
Does that still give you time?
That gives us 8 days.
Today? Well, whatever people want to do. I mean,
This was more of a planning issue.
yep.
Well, we could, I mean, since there is a list, we could vote to endorse. And that means, if I understand that, if we did vote to endorse, they could put that on. Where does this go, by the way? I mean, does this go to the legislature, or?
We have sent it to the legislature. I mean, it's typically something that we often
To the Speaker of the
basically
House.
hand out at and obviously
Say that's the legislature.
we have it on our website. Yeah.
So I would be comfortable doing that if that's okay.
You want to do that, and maybe for us to explore, what the appropriate route is to go with,
Well, we can take the vote and figure out how to get it there.
okay,
I mean, it's like a Christmas list.
yeah.
Make it out, you hope Santa gets it. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Scituate Planning Board endorse the zoning, is there zoning reform bill, a more detailed,
It's
H4065, that is currently in the Massachusetts State Legislature.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Discussion?
Yeah, I have discussion here because I'm looking at this memorandum that came from Jay Wickersham. And it appears there's at least one section that MSGA does not support. And I can't say that I've committed to memory the rest of it. Not that, in general, some of the provisions you've mentioned, I wouldn't support. It's just that if we're going on record as supporting the whole thing, I guess I would prefer to look at the whole thing. And I think what we've got today was sort of a brief overview, unless I'm mistaken.
The language on the non-conforming uses, this was something that, again, it came out, it was a change that the municipalities committee made, and we do not like it at all, and we are working to have that language removed. So I would say, yeah, I mean, going through with the fine-tooth comb makes sense.
What is it we're,
I think I sent the whole bill around, in the material that you got.
You didn't send it all, you sent a lot of it.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
long.
I haven't had a chance to commit it to memory
Yeah,
yet.
it's going to
you know.
take a while for anybody to get through it.
Well, if you could support it, notwithstanding Bill Sections 9 through 10, that might answer the issue.
And you mean 14?
It's on page 5 of the SGA memo.
Is that number 14, though?
Yes.
Okay, so it says in Bill section 9 through 10. What if I amend the motion to say we support H4065, exclusion of sections 9 through 10?
I think, yeah, as a minimum, we ought to do that.
But you're right, we don't, there could be other things.
I mean, I'm
guess.
I guess I'm reading, it depends on how the letter is written. I mean, if we provide sort of general support for the notion of zoning reform and some of the elements in here, I guess one of the things I want to be careful about is that we're not committing to something we haven't even learned about yet. So.
Conceptually approved.
Yeah. And that almost sounds like what this letter is saying. Although,
Because I'm a little reticent to endorse the entire thing. I haven't studied the entire thing. But the pieces that we talked about, I would be supportive.
Do you want to put it back on the agenda for next time and give
can
everyone a chance to really dig into it?
Rescind the motion.
Well, pleasure of the board.
Well, when's our next meeting is?
The 24th, so 14 days.
so that only gives you 7 or 8
As,
days.
as the bill is at the legislative level right now, it will either be passed or not passed in a form determined by the legislators, not by us. And so it seems to me we could draft a letter of general support. I mean, if the options are either to support it or not support it, I think we can all agree that, given the faith we have in our elected legislative representatives to do the right thing most of the time, I would certainly vote to generally support this initiative.
Oh, I see you're listed here, Laura.
Yeah, I must have pushed a button on the computer or something.
Well, yeah, I guess at the level of this particular document that says, boards have voted to endorse, I guess what does that mean per se? That we generally agree? It's what I think about. Endorse meaning that we generally agree with the bill.
I think maybe I could go on record as saying, we think it's important legislation to update our antiquated planning and zoning laws. I think the general language is fine, right? It's just when you get into the details, and I hear what you're saying.
Those won't be
Well,
ours
but-
to manipulate
Yeah, but
in any case.
It is sending a message if we send a letter to our legislators saying we endorse the whole thing, that we're endorsing maybe some things that we don't agree with either, right?
Yeah.
But
Yep.
I would be happy sort of supporting it in a general way and probably specifically carving out this section that the MSGA doesn't support.
I mean, is this, would you
That'd be
be
fine.
willing to put a draft letter together?
I will take a shot at it.
Why don't you do that, and then we can route it around.
Do we need to vote on this, or do we do that? Doesn't matter?
Well, you might want to take some kind of a vote.
You probably need to see the letter first, though, right?
Back to where I was before.
Yeah, Steve draft a letter.
So we draft the letter and that, and then we'll go from there.
All right.
After everyone tweaks it.
So you have conceptual support.
Thank you very much.
The means of which, how we generate it is yet to be determined.
Very good.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
And maybe
Thank you.
calling you have you help me draft this letter too.
I can drop some cards off.
Great.
Yeah,
That'd be
good.
Great.
Do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
I think we've met before. Yeah, that's right.
Thanks.
Thanks, sir. Okay, it is now 8:35.
Yes.
The next item on the agenda is the continuation of the public hearing, accessory dwelling special permit for 75 Moreland Road. Gentlemen, you're up. What I'm going to suggest is, because this has been continued multiple times, if you take us down to ground zero and build this project back up again.
See what we can do. So Jeff DeLisi, I'm here with the applicant, John McNamara, as well as Paul Marabito from Ross Engineering and Julie Johnson from Custom Home Design. See if I can kind of summarize fairly quickly, and maybe it'll jog everybody's memories, but the lot in question, what we're here for is an accessory dwelling special permit. This initial hearing, I think, opened in like June of 2013 and has been kicking around. We've made various changes to the plans, and we had to go to zoning for something. And we're here now. We have a kind of a unique situation. You can see that the primary dwelling, which is in the dark color over there, is on a large lot on Moreland Road, but it's kind of right where the spit, kind of across the street from where the path to the spit is. It is on a lot that is approximately 23,000 square feet, and all of the lots in this particular zoning district, which is the R2 zoning district, the 20,000 square foot zone, all of the lots on that side of Collier and Moreland Road, kind of on inside the circle there, are all 10,000 square foot lots, except for this one. And actually the R3 zone, the R2 zone actually kind of is this lot here, and then kind of from here up on this side of the road. There's only about 4 or 5 dwellings, I think. Anyway. So what we've done is we're proposing, and Paul can go through it, but basically we believe that we've met all of, well, this project actually does, not only the lot, but also the proposed accessory dwelling. It meets all of the dimensional requirements of the zoning bylaw, front, side, rear setbacks. We're proposing an accessory dwelling that is approximately, I think it's around 23 feet in height. Or thereabouts. The height requirement is 35 feet. And basically, the gross floor area of this particular proposed dwelling is about 31% of the primary dwelling, and under the section of the bylaw, it cannot exceed 40%. Over the course of the last year, as this has been pending, we've done some design changes to try and, at the request of the board, to try to reduce the appearance of the building and the size of the building, some dimensional kind of aspects as well. We've brought the height down. We've lowered the garage slab into the ground, which kind of brought the area above grade, basically 2 stories. We've kind of done some roof changes and pitch changes and so forth. So there's been some design changes that have occurred. At the last hearing, the board had asked us to provide kind of an understanding of the landscaping, the grading, how the grading is going to work, and basically a picture is as you're going around Collier Road and coming around the curve onto Moreland, kind of what the house the proposed accessory dwelling would appear to look as. And so Paul has actually 2 red lines on that plan over there, and they're the two lines of the photographs that were filed since the last hearing, which superimpose the proposed accessory dwelling there. So we've also provided some additional photos as well. And so we think that we've kind of responded to what the board had asked us to do, and spend some time, and we're happy that we've been able to employ some of these features to try and be responsive and to the board, and we think we have a good project, and we've met the requirements, and so more than happy to send it off to you guys to ask any questions, or Julie questions about the photographs that were provided, or Paul questions about the site plan. One additional item is, I personally met with Chris Kennedy over at Kennedy's Country Gardens, and explained to Chris kind of what the concerns of the board were, and asked him to provide us with a vegetation plan that we can put on the site plan, which we have put, we've incorporated aspects of that onto the site plan. We have set forth kind of the types of vegetation, and kind of I learned a few things about it, as well as we also did some screening. We have this area here, which as you're coming around, we were trying to focus on softening, as well as this area over here. We have an existing dwelling here, which we're seeking to screen with. It's not an arborvitae. Chris had indicated he didn't think arborvitaes would do so well out there. So it's a juniper that has a certain height that would also work. So that's what we've done.
Why don't you, if you don't mind, take us back, revisit the use of the building, the accessory dwelling, and the relative dimensions?
I'm going to have Paul talk to the relative dimensions, other than the fact that, well, let me back up and see if I can, the use. The reason why we're proposing to do this is to enable Mr. and Mrs. McNamara's family to live there. They currently have 3 elderly parents. The house has been designed to be handicap accessible, and 4 children, one of which just graduated college, none of which presently have the means to live in Scituate in Third Cliff on their own. So that's the reason we believe it kind of meets a hardship of one of the purposes of the bylaw, which is to meet the family needs of the residents of the town of Scituate. As far as the relative dimensions are concerned, Paul can talk about that, but I think when you ask relative, Bill, you're probably asking about the size of the accessory dwelling in relation to the size of the primary dwelling?
Yep.
Okay. The primary dwelling is 5 bedrooms. The accessory dwelling is proposed to have 3 bedrooms. The gross floor area, I think, is somewhere south of 1,500 square feet of the accessory dwelling, and the primary dwelling is, I'm not sure what the dimension is on the square footage of that. Paul can talk about it, but in relation to the two, you're talking about a structure that is smaller in height than the primary dwelling, smaller in size, smaller in the number of bedrooms, and therefore the number of occupants that could use it. It is approximately 31% of the gross floor area of the primary dwelling.
For the primary dwellings, 5,200 square feet.
4668. Is that what you have? Is 46 about 4,700?
The size of the primary dwelling, gross square foot, Paul?
I
believe you're right, about 4668, sounds right.
That includes the space in the basement that was like
4,668.
One of the
In the accessory dwelling?
1,453, which is 31.1% of the existing. I'm reading these numbers from the notes on the plan we supplied you with.
Anything else?
Unless you have any questions.
Laura? Comments?
Other than one additional thing, actually, is
Okay.
I think this was discussed in my review of the minutes. I wasn't involved in the hearing in 2013. And I'm pretty sure actually it was discussed a bit at the last hearing, but basically in this zoning district, provided that you could actually meet all of the required setbacks, a residential accessory building could be constructed there to have certain allowed residential accessory uses as of right. A detached three-car garage could be 35 feet in height, barn, an office space with home occupation under the bylaw, and I believe also, I was kind of looking at it, kind of shocked me as I was looking at it today, but it was like you could also put in there a bed and breakfast or some kind of lodging house with a limitation on the number of units and so forth. So there are some uses that this property could be utilized. We think that this is a good use of the property, and a use that allows the board also to have a certain amount of input as to how the structure looks and appears and where it's located and massing of it and so forth. And the zoning bylaw, I did notice, actually has a definition of accessory dwelling in the definition section. And it says a separate housekeeping unit. And I was kind of curious as to, well, what does a unit mean? To try and get into the concept of the intention of the bylaw. It's not a defined term, but it's also used elsewhere in the bylaw. And a unit is used in the definition of single-family dwelling, whereas it says that in a single-family dwelling you could have a residential unit. And when you look at the word dwelling, a unit could be for a family or an individual. So I was kind of piecing it together because I know there were some questions at the last hearing. To try and understand the intention there. So for what it's worth, that's kind of what I found. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Laura?
The board has been discussing this for a while now, and there have been some changes in the board since this came in, and I think there have been some nice modifications on the plan. But I think there are still some things that you really need to think carefully about and just decide how what your gut level reaction is. Because this is a special permit, it is discretionary, it's, your group decision. So the accessory dwelling that's being proposed, it is the largest of any that the planning board has seen in a residential district. It does, in many ways read like a separate single-family house. It seems comparable in height to the existing house. It's going to be quite visible as you come around the bend in the road. There's really no way to, to hide it. It's got the widow's walk on it, which is kind of, makes it very, makes it maybe a little more showy than that it would without it. So I think those are the things, the kinds of things that the board has been wrestling with, and you may need to just continue talking about a little bit and hopefully come to some conclusion about. I think the landscaping will help the appearance of it. The screening from the abutter is going to be helpful as well, but it's still, it is in the R2 district, even though it's maybe the only parcel on the inside of the curve that's in it. That's the way it was zoned. That's what people in the neighborhood really, what they really expect based on, what that zoning is. So those are some of the things I think to take into consideration. There is zoning which does say that you can't have more than 2 houses on a lot, and I think that's to keep the character consistent with, single-family neighborhood. So, I think those are things
When
for
you
you
can't
all.
have 2 houses on, you mean like, what does that exactly mean?
It means you can't have 2 houses on a lot. You can't have, this is different from that because one of them is an accessory unit.
Yeah, I think
It's an
that,
accessory dwelling rather than a separate house.
yeah, I think that it's, you can't have 2 single-family dwellings on a lot, and this is considered to be an accessory dwelling. So essentially, you can have 2 primary dwellings on a single lot.
It's-
But you could have a dwelling in a separate building that's an accessory use. The question is whether it would be an accessory dwelling use or some other kind of accessory use that's allowed as of right.
I think the reason for that 2 houses on a lot, I mean, when you hear these words, it might seem kind of arbitrary, but what that's getting at is just trying to maintain a certain density. And if you have 2 houses on a lot, then you have double the density as if you have 1 house on the lot. It's just, it's so basic, it's probably, like maybe sounds a little funny to go over it, it like in detail, but I think that's basically what they're getting at, is people expect a certain density of homes in the neighborhood, and if you double that all of a sudden, then people's feelings about the neighborhood will change, and it won't be what they expected it to be.
Richard?
Well, this has been a long process. I went through my archive today from the first proposal back a year ago through all the different changes. So first off, I do appreciate the applicant making the changes and trying to make it more of a subordinate unit and changing the appearance of it. As Laura said, it's still the largest if we were to approve that, and that still is a bit of a concern. And also, not knowing exactly who's going to live in the unit. I mean, it definitely it will be someone from the family.
That's absolutely, there's no intention presently to have it be anything other than that. That's the impetus as to why this was done.
The other question I have that somewhat tangent, but in front of the primary residence now, I believe there's now 3 parking spaces that are gravel as you come around the road. That's right off of Moreland. Like you pull off, and it's like almost like a retail parking area, gravel. Like,
On Collier,
is it, well, whatever,
On
is it Collier as you come,
it's actually 6 spots on Collier.
it's 6?
Yeah.
What is the purpose of those parking spaces? Is it all private?
So my friends can go to the Spit without getting tickets.
Okay,
The Spit's a very desirable beach, and we have a
Absolutely.
lot of family and friends.
Absolutely.
And they use that parking lot, so they have a place to go. When they go to the beach, they can park there.
so with the,
You're looking for a spot?
well, yeah, okay, well, no, publicly. So I guess with this being a particular difficult situation in the sense that it is such a large residence, would the applicant be amenable to, for instance, marking 2 of the spots as an example, that they could be public use?
No.
No?
It would be impossible to police. If they started using part of that lot, I'd have to hire a cop to keep people off the property. I'm not going to allow people to use my property unless they're friends of our family. In the accessory dwelling is completely around the corner. It's 400 feet, it's around the corner.
I understand.
And it has 4 or 5 spots for it.
Right. No, and I was just, again, in the spirit of compromise,
Right.
trying to say, I know the board has been grappling with this as a very difficult decision, and that might sway me one way or the other if there was some compromise, so.
I'm sorry, I mean, it's a terrible problem up on Dirt Cliff with parking anyway, and if there's 2 public spots there, it's just gonna open up Pandora's box. There'll be parking all over my lawn, everywhere. It's already a problem enough as it is without having public parking spots up there. The town right away is 35 feet wide. There's plenty of room if the town wanted to put parking spots there. I'd encourage it because it would prohibit people from parking illegally. People drive on my lawn perpetually because they park illegally across the street every weekend.
Yeah, I can certainly,
On the weekends, you navigate around cars. and
Yeah.
trucks.
Yeah.
They drive on my lawn. It's very frustrating.
As far as the size of the structure is concerned, just if I can address that, is I have no knowledge as to whether it's the largest accessory dwelling in the town or not. But it's, accessory dwellings under this particular bylaw are to be viewed in relation to the size of the primary dwelling.
right.
And I don't necessarily think that it's fair to just say, well, the size is what it is, or it's the largest, or whatever. It's really the relative percentage in relation to the initial dwelling that really matters. I think, especially as you read the bylaw. So that's just the only point I wanted to make on that.
Yeah, I think this has come up multiple times where the board does have the discretion, though, to, it's not by right per se, because it is a special permit. So, but that's where we kind of get into that fuzzy area of, does the size matter? Is it too large for an accessory? And so you have to look at the purpose of the accessory dwelling, what it's to provide, affordable, an affordable option for family members or others. So that's, you're basically saying that, not A, which is they're no longer physically, they cannot financially maintain their home. It doesn't provide a variety of housing needs to meet the residents. So.
Are you talking about the purposes?
Yeah, I think that's where we also grapple is that.
I actually am aware of the board's recent discussion on that issue, and I kind of did a little research into it just to see if I can, because I kind of figured it would come up. And there's a recent case that is, I think it's called 81 Spooner LLC versus Town of Brookline. It's a Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court case from 2012. And it contains some language in it that I thought was kind of on point with that discussion. And that is that what it said in that case is the Town of Brookline happened to have, just like this bylaw has, section 1 that was like a purpose, a zoning purpose, so the reason why we're enacting the zoning bylaw. And it had various kind of reasons why, objectives of the bylaw. And then it had the provisions and the regulations of the bylaw itself. And what the court said was, and actually I remember it was to prevent overcrowding. The court recognized that it was one of the purposes. And what the court said about it was the dimensional requirements that are shown in the bylaw after the objective or the purpose of preventing overcrowding are there to ensure that the objectives of the purpose of the bylaw are met. And I think that's analogous to this. You have a situation where you have, if you kind of step back and you look at the section of the bylaw, you have 5 separate purposes that are set forth. And then you have the criteria for meeting the accessory dwelling special permit criteria. And the criteria don't say that you have to meet all of the purposes of the bylaw. In fact, you couldn't meet all the purposes. There's probably no properties in Scituate that could actually meet all 5 of these criteria.
I don't think that's the case. That I've always looked at it, you need one of them.
And I would almost disagree with that, because I think that that what you have behind that are the criteria that are there to help you to achieve the objectives of the bylaw.
I think there's checks and balances, regardless of how you look at it. That you have a purpose, and then you have the conditions for the accessory dwelling. And I think that somewhere along the line, there has to be checks and balances to make sure that whatever you have for conditions, in effect, meet one of the purposes.
Well, and I believe that we've met, purpose C, for instance. I believe we've met that, and I think I outlined that at the last hearing. But yeah, I mean, respectfully disagree on that. I mean, it doesn't say that you have to meet the sections of the bylaw, and on the issue of the purpose, it says that you have to meet the criteria, but just and I rely on that Spooner case as kind of a guide there, because it's an analogous situation. I'm more than happy to provide it to you. I have an extra copy here, so.
Do you want me to voice an opinion or wait?
You can do whatever thou wishes.
The floor is yours.
If you want to wait, you can wait, we can hear what the rest of the board.
No. I mean, I think I've expressed my, problems with the current bylaw as it stands. So I feel that, the board has an onus to potentially change it. I guess the way I look at this is, as you said, the accessory dwelling, you could build a garage, basically the exact same dimensions, but a shell, is what I understand. And that could be built anyway. So, based on that, I am leaning, again, looking at the provisions of the bylaw, even though I'm not necessarily 100% happy with it, I feel like as a board, we sort of have to stick to the legality of what the criteria is. So I would probably be on the side of voting for approval.
That's your opinion.
That's my opinion.
Steve?
Well, I guess I note that we're not here today to talk about approving a garage, so, or any other kind of use. You've asked for an accessory dwelling permit, so that's the only thing I'll focus on. And I think the issue that I see is still an issue, and I've seen the pictures, and I appreciate you putting these pictures together. I don't think it has changed my view of it, and that view being that I don't see it as a clearly subordinate dwelling to the primary residence. And, in sort of thinking through that, as Richard said here, it's the largest accessory dwelling that would be approved in Scituate, and we have the numbers on that one. But more importantly is that I think it doesn't pass the test of being clearly subordinate. It looks like another house. And granted, all the other lots in the neighborhood are on smaller lots, but this was a bigger lot. People presumably bought their houses knowing the lot sizes. And when I look at those two residences, I don't see a clearly subordinate accessory dwelling.
May I comment?
Sure.
Thanks. I think your zoning bylaw defines what clearly subordinate means. And the reason why I say that is, if you look at the paragraph that deals with that issue, which is that, I think it's paragraph F. It's basically a 4-sentence paragraph. And first it says that's the clearly subordinate, and in the same paragraph, it then goes on to say, a floor limitation and a percentage. And when you deal with issues like statutory construction in the state of Massachusetts, when you have ambiguous or general language followed by more specific language, the courts will always look at the more specific language to understand what the general language and the ambiguous language means. And to further step back, you have it's not like you have the percentage or the square foot limitation set forth in a different paragraph altogether. It's set forth in the next sentence of the same paragraph, the same section of the bylaw. And you all might disagree with me, but I mean, I think it's right there. I mean, the intention of the bylaw is quite clear on the issue of clearly subordinate. It actually is limiting it to size. So, I mean,
Well, it's limiting it to size. It's also very clear, without ambiguity, that it should be clearly subordinate. And I think that's a fairly clear standard as well.
except that it's not a defined term elsewhere in the bylaw.
Doesn't matter. It's written in the zoning bylaw here as part of our charge to look at. And so it's our charge to look at whether we consider this to be clearly subordinate or not. And as well as whether it meets the size requirements mentioned here at 750 square feet or 40%.
So, in your opinion, what about this is not clearly subordinate? The height is subordinate, the floor area is subordinate, the number of occupants it could accommodate is subordinate. So what about this proposed structure is not subordinate to the main structure?
It doesn't look like it's subordinate to the main structure. It looks like it's another house.
So you're talking about the size of the building,
Yeah.
which is discussed in that paragraph.
I'm talking about the physical size and the physical lot in the location it's specifically in.
We'll get public comment in a minute.
That's how I see it. I mean, you've attempted to reduce the sort of the overall impact of it, but I still don't see that it meets that test of being sort of clearly subordinate.
It's not as if we're on, right on the edge here of 40%. We're 25% less than 40% on the size of the building as far as the floor area that's allowed.
Yeah, but this is also in the context of where it's located, on the lot that it's located on, up against the neighbor's lot as well. And if I remember right, there were 2 or 3 boats stored in there as well. And now we're talking about 6 parking spaces with cars. It sounds like it's also beginning to become a very full lot.
All of which are allowed uses of right in this zone.
Sure. And
you have-
so
if a house-
my view is really only dealing with the accessory dwelling. And, I saw the pictures that you generated, and I have a hard time calling that an accessory dwelling.
Before the board votes on this, I'd ask for a straw poll vote.
Let's hear what the rest of the board has to say. Robert? You finished?
Yeah.
Robert?
I think I've expressed this before, and I agree with Richard that there's a crying need to reword this particular section of our bylaws. And I believe that in general and in concept, a building this size probably isn't what was anticipated when accessory dwellings were included in this. And I think we're frustrated because we've seen cases of kind of creep in this issue, and where will it stop? I mean, if you had a 7,000 square foot main residence, then your accessory dwelling could be 2,800 square feet, I suspect. We may even get to see that one of these days. On the other hand, like Richard, I look at the bylaw, and it's very difficult for me to say this proposed development doesn't meet the requirements. As it's stated here. I don't think those requirements are the ones I would like to see, and I will like to see them changed. We tried to change them a couple of years ago. The vote did not pass town meeting. That's very unfortunate, and we'll try again. So I guess that's where I stand on the matter. a straw poll. If I could, I would probably vote not to approve. I don't think I can do that. So, there we are.
Vote to what?
If I could, I would vote not to approve this,
But you don't.
but I don't believe I can do that.
Well, my thoughts are similar in that part of the difficulty that I saw was that we have this lot on the inside of the street that is zoned similar to the ones on the far side. If this lot was across the street, I think this would be less impactful in the neighborhood. But where it is, given the end of the spit there and the other properties that are significantly smaller, I kind of fall in line with yes. From a square footage standpoint, it is less than the main house. It's met the setbacks. I think the difficulty comes up that exactly that is that it's a larger lot with different requirements next to smaller lots with the same requirements. And given the wording of the bylaw the way it is now, I would have to agree that yes, I don't see, there's nothing that stands out as a reason to not vote for this.
It's kind of funny you should say that about the zone, because the fact that this is kind of spot zoned on the inside of that is precisely, in my estimation, probably why it wouldn't look out of place, because everything else right there on that side of the street is on top of one another. I mean, you have houses that are pre-existing non-conforming houses that are, within feet off the property line, and the house on the north there, on the opposite side of that hedge, actually conforms to the setback of the zoning bylaw. It just looks like it's a lot closer because it's in a different zoning district.
It's only an
It has a different
8-foot
setback.
8-foot setback in that
So like
zone.
when you compare the setback of the accessory dwelling to the setback of that other dwelling, they're within a legal distance of one another by any objective measure. Which I just think is kind of interesting in this. It wouldn't, in my estimation, look out of place because everything else is zoned that way, all around it. But
And I think that might be one of the stumbling blocks in that it is one lot, and we're visually going to make it look like two lots. Again, without having the lot lines drawn on the ground, as somebody came around and, came around Collier and then went around Moreland and said, okay, these lots are like that, and then on further down Moreland, things open up a little bit, so.
Guess it brings it down to me. And my position is really not changed from the last time that we saw or heard this. I don't see that second house as being subordinate to the first. I really don't. Is it a nice house? Beautiful house, from the drawings and everything else. But it still looks as though it's a separate house and not subordinate to the main house. And I guess I read that paragraph. It sits there and says, one, it should be subordinate, and then two, it goes on to talk about the size. So I think there are two elements that are there. They're not necessarily linked together, they just happen to be in the same paragraph, which is sort of the same section, which is F. All right. Any other comments from the board?
I didn't actually get the straw poll from Richard and Stephen. I understand what your positions are, but I'm curious on the poll question.
Oh, one other comment before I add, and that is, if I remember right, and Laura, you can check me, but I think the three-car garage is a special permit also.
I'll have to look that up.
No, under section 420 of, get it right here.
It's two anyway.
No, we're talking about the alternative.
Yeah. So section 420 of the bylaw is your permitted uses, and one of which is enumerated as a residential accessory use. And then 430 of your bylaw defines that. And it has various residential accessory uses that are allowed as of right. So residential accessory uses are allowed as of right.
If I look at Table of Use Regulations 420,
Yep.
private garage for more than 3 automobiles.
More than.
More than.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you look at sub C, it's residential accessory use, which is yes across the board, and it's allowed as of right.
Okay, I stand corrected.
That's just a bit confusing bylaw, as we've all been discussing. That's clear.
Let me do a little bit of housekeeping beforehand. On our agenda at 9:15, we have old business, new business. What I'm going to suggest is, if the board has no objection, we'll just continue with this discussion.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment, again, going back in my archive. As far as the size, I don't believe the size of the accessory dwelling has changed from the original proposal. You know, we brought the eaves down, we brought the look, and you've done mitigation factors, but I think the actual square footage remains the same.
Yeah, the percentage switched from about 39% to about 31%, and that's
Okay.
because of the build-out of the basement, which was allowed as per a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals after the hearing opened, but before the last hearing. So that's what basically brought the percentage down.
Mm-hmm.
But to answer your question about the straw poll, I just...
Let me suggest before we do that, that we come back, open it up, and get public opinion.
Oh, yeah, sure, absolutely.
Now's your chance.
I'm the homeowner, I'd like to just speak, and I'm very, very disappointed in that the town has a bylaw, and originally when the bylaw was written, Laura, I believe it was 50%, and it was modified through the process to 40% to set a standard to define what subordinate is. I've spent $20,000 in over a year, and this board will not tell me why don't you put a limitation on the square footage? If your intent is to have a limitation on the square footage of an accessory dwelling, that should be in writing and it should be published. Because people come in here and spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars because the board feels it's maybe too big. But it's not what it says. You have a set of regulations. We go into a planner, we're given a set of regulations. It says 40%. It says meet the setbacks, meet these conditions. We hire architects, we hire engineers, we bring lawyers to hearings and spend a fortune of money, and then it may not be subordinate. That's not fair. That's not right.
I would agree with you.
Yeah.
And if we could get people to change the bylaw, then
We
cannot change the bylaw.
And the town overwhelmingly denied it.
Right.
Do what
So-
the town wants you to do. Adhere to the regulations because it's clearly subordinate.
And so it all depends on what those regulations say, right? And one of the regulations say it needs to be clearly subordinate to the primary dwelling.
Okay,
And that
so
is the
if I
conversation we're
listen to
having
my
at this point.
builders, I had two builders, they both told me, build the barn with your office and the gym in the size of the original proposal, which was 35 foot above the existing lot,
Mm-hmm.
12 feet higher than where we are today, as a matter of right, and then go in and get a permit. If I did that and I came before this board, the structure was already there, how would you vote as a straw poll? You'd have to, and if I had one of my family members move in there, how would you have to vote?
You couldn't have somebody move in there.
I couldn't, but I'd give you a letter, they would live there. I'll give it to
It
my
would have to
sons,
be
let them move in
then
there.
approved as an accessory dwelling.
Pardon?
It would then have to be approved as an accessory dwelling. So you couldn't have somebody live there.
Your question is if it was under the same roof.
It's an interesting point, because what you guys are articulating is the size of the building. And if the building could be built as of right, and then we come back in here to request an accessory dwelling special permit, size of the building isn't an issue anymore, because it's there. Which is exactly...
There are people that is exactly what they've done for the accessory dwelling. They've come back out and they built
That's what you force us to do.
They built their house and they built the equivalent of an accessory dwelling space for it. Then they came in and looked for the approval for the accessory dwelling.
So, Mr. McNamara, I want to say that I completely agree with you, and with all due respect, I would actually like to use this as a test case going forward in saying that if people were upset, this is something that could help us change our bylaws. Because I personally think we do need to have a cap on the square footage. Whatever that ends up being, I don't know what it
And
is.
the board has felt that and tried to change the bylaw.
Right.
But how did the town vote at town meeting?
Right, you are correct.
They denied it.
You are correct. And there were a number of other things that also, it was very complicated at that particular time. But anyway, that's why I still am in the state of, based on the regulations, at least that I read, I think that you're absolutely correct that we need to be fair. So, again, that's my standing, but.
Gentlemen,
I'd also just like to point out, as a 20-plus year resident of the Cliff, I don't think it's out of characteristic with the Cliff. It's not the Cliff of 20 years ago. Just because their garage is separate, you're saying it doesn't look right. But if you do it in proportion to the size of their lot, it looks fine. I'll take you on a walking tour of the Cliff and show you the number of homes that have done additions, including 3-car garages with rooms above them. It's no different, it's just that they're on smaller lots and they're attached to the house. It looks beautiful. They have a big lot, they've got the room for it. This poor guy spent $20,000, I'm hearing, I'm croaking over that. I mean, to me, the whole neighborhood thing, I know there was a guy from New Jersey that came here, and maybe a few others, that said they don't like it, but I don't think it's our right to pick on this one guy when everybody else in our neighborhood, myself included 20 years ago, have done these major renovations. It's what's happening in town. Take a ride around Second Cliff. You'll see a garage as big as that on 7 Crescent Ave. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Looks like it's been there forever. It hasn't been. It's a changing Cliff. And I think what they're doing is in proportion and actually looks really nice. And as far as having an in-law apartment or an accessory dwelling, it's not the first one. We have multiple in-law residents in our neighborhood. We have someone in our neighborhood that rents out rooms. I don't even know if that's legal. I mean, there's literally, they're not breaking new ground here. The proportion of their land and what they're proposing actually fits if you actually walk around and look at everybody else and the size of their lots. It doesn't look bad. I think it looks great, and I encourage them to continue forward. I hope you vote for it.
anybody else? Okay. What's the pleasure of the board? You would like to straw vote?
Yeah, I think we would.
I would vote to approve. I feel like I have the responsibility based on these regulations to do so. I agree with Bob number one, that I don't see anything why I can't deny that. Even though I may not be happy with it personally, but.
I just happen to disagree with you in terms of the interpretation of our regulations here. I do think the accessory dwelling and the clearly subordinate language is in addition to the other language in this paragraph. And that's why I think it would be an approval I wouldn't give.
Bob?
I would vote to approve. I think the development meets the criteria that are in the zoning bylaws, that are in black and white. I can absolutely understand that you've hired an architect and an engineer and an attorney and spent a lot of money to get to this point based on how you read our bylaws, and I can't read them any other way. So I would vote to approve it.
I guess I'll make you Robert this time.
Well, I kind of concur. When this process started, you were given, you could, download the bylaws, read the bylaws, and you did your best to adhere to them. So again, given what they are at this point, I would vote to approve.
Bill, before you go, before you speak, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at Bob actually, and I'm listening to Bob, and it just dawned on me that Bob is is an assistant building commissioner in town, I believe, and
3 days into it.
I know that under the zoning bylaw, the building commissioner is the zoning enforcement officer as well, and is asked to make calls on the zoning bylaw and how regulations are read. And I think that Bob kind of has dual authority here, and it makes sense maybe to take his 3 days of sage experience and apply it to,
I think that's a
Or I
nice.
could recuse myself.
I think it's, yeah,
this is a lawyer talking.
I mean, I think that's a nice approach, but he's wearing one hat right now.
Yeah, and I don't think, prior to that position even coming on the horizon, frankly, I still had and expressed, and, I believe I'm quoted in the minutes, essentially the same opinion that I've just given you tonight. So it hasn't changed.
Bill, I'd just like to make a few comments. When I first came in here, after I did my presentation, and I was doing it, one of the comments I made to the board was that my office is usually the first stop for people in the town of Scituate that want to do something with their land. I sit down with them, I go through all the rules and regulations, and there's a whole ton of them. And in this case here, I went through with Mr. McNamara, I said, here's the bylaw, here's the backup for the town, this is what you have to do with the rules and regulations. The largest one I've done was 12 square feet. What's unique about the accessory dwellings is that you can have a garage in the building. That probably is one of the features that makes it look a little larger than you would normally expect to see if it was inside the existing dwelling. But the bottom line is when I sat down with Mr. McNamara, I said, here's the rules, they're very clear. One thing that I've never, and I still don't understand, what the board's definition of subordinate is. I've gone to Webster's dictionary, and I looked it up, and it says similar to. When I read the bylaw, the impression I got was that it had to be similar in nature to the existing house if it was attached or inside the house. They didn't, if you put an addition on the existing house, the outside features such as the windows and the clapboards would have to be the same as the existing house. So it didn't look like two separate structures. I've also pointed out that this lot is the victim of spot zoning. The zone line goes right through here. This is A2, and this is A3. Everything on this side of Model Road, coming up to Gilson Road, that's all a 20,000 square foot zone. Whoever drew this map, either it was done intentionally for whatever reason, or it was just a mistake. But what I've done on this drawing, I didn't give you this on the first run through, but what I showed here was, if you look at the size of the lots around here, this is not what's on that lot. They could build within 20 feet of the rear yard, and they could build in about 75% of that lot, and it'd be perfectly legal. And if you look at the lots here and here, and some of the ones across the street, they're very small. Had this been zoned right, you would clearly have two houses here. The total land area is 24,335. These lots are in the 10,000 square foot zone, all around it.
Yeah, but the zoning, Paul, with all due respect, it is what it is.
It is, but.
I mean, we're not drawing the lines have been
But
drawn.
when Jeff pointed out what the accessory uses were for this zoning district here, if I lived in the neighborhood, I would much rather see this here than some other accessory dwelling, which could be 10 feet higher than this one, and it could be larger than that.
Accessory building.
An accessory building. And whether or not someone would come back at a later date and try to convert it to an accessory dwelling, they could also build something here and, like the bylaw says, you could have an office in there, you could have a gym, you could just for recreational use, you could have a 3-car garage there, and they're right. If you have a accessory dwelling here, it's going to look like the other buildings and structures in the neighborhood. It isn't going to stand out like those accessory uses would look like. Again, I'm just saying that it's very frustrating when we sit down, we go through the rules and regulations, and Mr. Mercer, who was on the board at the time, he said, Paul, you come in here, the plans are always good, you follow the bylaw, but the building was too big. And I said, well, at the point, at that time, it was 39%, now it's down to 31.1%. Again, if I live in the neighborhood, I'd much rather see this structure here than what we could and probably would have. I can't speak for the owner, but
I mean, just as an observation, Paul, an observation, given the care and attention that he put into the main house, which is an absolute beautiful house, right? He wouldn't put something that would be less than that quality or less than that type of a structure.
But the structure would be a lot better than this, is what I'm saying.
But, I mean, that's not what's sitting in front of him.
No,
but you're gonna force, I'm gonna build the original
it doesn't
plan.
have to come to you, that's the
Simple.
point.
I wanted the building for storage and future for my family. I'm gonna build it for storage, and if I have a need for the family down the road, you're gonna have a structure there that's out to the zoning limits. I'm gonna build as big as I possibly can. It'll match my house, because I'm not gonna destroy my property, but I'm gonna go to the zoning limits. And I'll pull a permit next week with the original plan. I'm not threatening you, but I've been here a year and a half of my life, and I need storage. There's boats in the yard. I think they're unsightly. The whole purpose of designing this structure was to put the boats and the trailers underneath that garage, so I had a place to put them. Because I don't like having them outside either.
I appreciate that.
You know,
So, to Bill and Steve, and by the way, Jeff, thank you. I feel like he kind of made a believer out of me when we were looking at F. If that's the thing that we're really kind of catching on is the accessory dwelling shall be clearly subordinate. I think we can all agree that that subordinate word is vague. It's like, that's beautiful. You know, it's, what may be beautiful to me is not beautiful to you. However,
It's, let's just not speak about beauty, because that's not what we're judging things on here. Okay?
That was just a correlation.
Okay.
Excuse me. So the word subordinate is not well defined. However, I think he did clearly state that since it's not defined in the same paragraph, it does talk about size. So that, it's saying, okay, what do we mean by subordinate? And then it continues in the same paragraph that no accessory dwelling shall exceed the maximum of either 750 or the 40%. So, I don't know, it seems to me that that was grouped together for some particular reason to help define what subordinate is.
I could be convinced if somebody has some other documentation about how this got developed or how it's been interpreted, but it seems to me, when you talk about 750 square feet or 40% of the total square footage, you're talking in two dimensions, right? You're talking about area, and you're not talking about volume. And so sort of my read of it is that clearly subordinate has to do with as much about volume and massing as it does with square footage.
but it didn't say that.
Yeah,
I'm reading what I read.
Another issue just jumped out at me, right? Because both Stephen and Bill, you're both articulating something here, which is, well, the alternative isn't in front of us. We're looking at this particular application. But the alternative is in front of you. And the reason why it is in front of you, and the reason why it matters, is because one of the stated objectives of the zoning bylaw in section 110 is to encourage the most appropriate use of land. And what we're telling you is that there is an alternative use here, and we'll be making use of that use. And the other reason why I think it matters also is because the criteria of maintaining the character of the neighborhood is also kind of in this bylaw. And I think it makes a lot of logical sense, a good logical approach for the board to approach it from the standpoint of, well, what would the character be if we didn't approve this?
Existing zoning is designed to protect the character of the neighborhoods.
Right.
So if it's a 2-car garage or 3-car garage or a 3-car garage and an office or whatever, and that's under existing zoning, then in effect inherently that it protects the neighborhood.
Right, but also
It
the
may
volume of a building.
It may not be the first choice,
Yep.
but it's still consistent with the neighborhood.
But the volume of a building is also kind of implicit in that, is it not? I mean, that's what you're saying, it's implicit here. Well, it would also be implicit in the concept of the alternative. And the alternative one of the purposes of this entire bylaw that governs the section of the bylaw we're talking about is to encourage the most appropriate use of land. I mean, if you're looking for a hook, that's your hook. It makes no sense for this town to turn a blind eye to the alternative use of this property when the applicant is saying, if I'm not going to get the vote, I am going to do that. And it's going to look worse. It has to. This is a beautifully designed project. It was designed to be a miniature version of the house that's existing. You have landscape features that you guys can control that wouldn't be a part of this board in the alternative scenario. And one of the kind of, this lot, even though it is a double-sized lot, or so to speak, it does have its challenges, and its challenges not only with respect to the grade of the property, but with respect to the fact that it's on this curve, this dramatic curve. And you have one house that's currently existing that's kind of pointing eastward, and you have another house, because it's around the curve, that has to be pointed in the opposite direction. I mean, not to say that rises to the level of a variance, but it certainly is, I think, kind of just another challenge, to look at these things. This isn't a similar situation in some of the other discussions that I'm aware of. We're not. This isn't a square or rectangular lot. This is a lot that's larger than any other lot on that side of the road by 2 times. Complies with all zoning and actually has this challenge of orientation that, I don't know, I mean,
Could I jump in
a
on
sensible
something?
approach makes a lot of sense to me.
If I could. One of the things that Jeff is talking about is this question of what the alternative would be. And, it's been discussed, would there be a possibility of having a very large garage or a barn with an office and a gym?
Or a boarding house.
Okay,
bed and breakfast.
excuse me, just be a minute. So I think that one of the differences is that the accessory dwelling is going to have people living in it. It's going to generate a certain amount of traffic. It's going to have a certain activity level. And whether the board likes that or doesn't like it, I think it's got a real difference in nature from having an accessory building of any other type, because there's going to be different people living in it. And it really does change the character to a certain extent, which I think the bylaw tries to control in all these ways that they talk about. And Mr. McNamara was right. It did start out at 50%, and then it went to 40, because somebody felt that 50 was, just a little too, too permissive, and that 40 would be better. But the reason that they had that in the first place was to try to make sure that this was used by maybe, not an unlimited number of people, not in the way that a normal house would be.
How do you know that?
Because I'm a planner, and these are professional, these are just planning principles that have to do with accessory dwellings. I've read a lot of the minutes on it because I was asked about that. I was asked about some
Where
issues.
are they? Let's talk about
Where are the minutes?
it. Come on, seriously.
Well, I don't think it'll serve anybody's
Honestly,
purpose to get into
Laura.
kind of a silly argument.
Silly is right.
Let me ask, any other questions, comments from the public?
I would like to add a comment. I think the McNamara's have made it really clear that the only occupants would be the elderly parents or the son that returns from living on the West Coast. That aside, I just want to say a few years ago, when the McNamara's came to me to design a house on this lot, and I collaborated with Paul Marabito to understand what were the parameters on this lot. The initial design was for a 5-bedroom house with a 3-car garage, with the rooms over that 3-car garage, and we had maxed out a footprint on that lot in the location of where the main house is now, and not even addressed the section over there that we're looking at the accessory dwelling now. And after we got it boxed out and looked at it, it was their decision to say, you know what, I don't think this is appropriate for the neighborhood. I think it's overwhelming. It's exposed on all 4 sides, 3 sides just by driving and approaching any house further up the road. And they wanted it to be more suitable and more attractive and something that the neighborhood would want to drive around every time they come and go in their neighborhood. So I think they took great pains to make this just be something that was very conducive to the neighborhood, good for their neighbors, good to look at from all 4 sides. And I just it's disappointing to hear that it doesn't seem to be fitting that bill for these folks when I think
I think
they
on the
were.
main house,
And
they,
we're told that we could do an accessory dwelling on the property
And
because
it-
there's room to do it.
So they
Well, you
can
can.
do a 3-car garage.
You
We
can
can?
do, you can do an accessory
What's
dwelling
the
on the
square
property.
footage then, Steve? Tell me
Huh?
the square footage. Tell me.
You know what the square footage is, it's in here, right?
40%.
It's
What is the square footage that's acceptable to the
750
board?
or 40%, whichever is greater. That's what's in the
Whichever is
bylaw.
greater.
Right.
And right
It's
here,
also, it should be clearly subordinate, right? So part of it, I grant you, it doesn't have a number on it, right? But part of it is how it's written in our bylaw. And that's what we're
And
trying to
it's
interpret. And if,
written in the
and
same
I would suggest, if you think there's an interpretation that's already addressed this, that says this is not something we should adhere by, then show me that interpretation.
Well, I've already talked to you about rule of construction with general and more precise language. I mean, that is one of the most well-known maxims in the law of the Commonwealth. And
Has this been tested?
as what? This particular provision?
Yes.
I have no intention of testing this provision, and I don't know if it has.
Okay.
I do know that the alternative will be built, and it's a crying shame because this board has everything in front of it to allow this to occur. I have no clue whether or not this provision was litigated. I know I haven't litigated it. I also know clearly subordinate isn't defined in the bylaw, and there's no issue, there's nowhere in this provision of the bylaw does it talk about massing or volume or those types of issues. But and I say this in all respects. This is obviously a heated issue, and I mean no disrespect to you or this board. I'm just trying to. I just think that it's, looking at this from a sensible approach makes all. I can't imagine. This bylaw says to encourage the most appropriate use of land is an objective, one of the 8 stated objectives of the entire 110-page document. And we're coming to you with a use of land and telling you that there's another use. And I think that this board has just as much obligation to look at that provision than it does the provision of unaccessory dwellings. And it's there, it's in front of you.
Steve, if volume is, what you stated as your major concern, I think that volume is actually implied by that square footage. You're not going to have 20-foot ceilings, so if you've got, pick a number, 1,000 square feet with an 8-foot ceiling, you've got 8,000 cubic feet. That could be 9,000 or 10,000, but it wouldn't be 20,000. So I don't think, I'm not convinced. The words in here that are objective set the parameters, and those parameters have been met. Clearly subordinate to me is a very subjective term. What's clearly subordinate to me may not be so to you.
Bill, I think we're realizing that.
Well, absolutely, and you simply can't make decisions based on that kind of language. You just, in my opinion, you just cannot.
Because we've made a lot of decisions based on that language in particular, talking about accessory dwellings.
No, I think
That's how we drove.
we've conditioned them, and we've tried to make them less impactful than they might otherwise have been, as we have done
Leaning
with
on
this
that
one.
language.
As we have done with this one.
But it was that language that that in effect took the two houses on, what was it, 25 Garden, and basically made it into
33 Garden Road.
33.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just down the street from where I think I am.
No, you're right, you're right. Enjoying them into one
And we took that
structure.
term and basically came back out and made what we all agreed was subordinate, and we ended up having a single house as opposed to separate houses.
If this were subdivided as a Form A lot, which isn't an issue before the board, it's a zoning issue, you could build a much larger home than the present one we're talking about.
Sure.
If this was subdivided and was and is 23,000 square foot, you could draw a line down the lot, file a Form A plan, and build a building twice as big as the one we're proposing with 8-foot setbacks for sidelines.
Yep, absolutely.
You could do that, yeah.
You do it with a
35 feet tall to max out the footprint.
Which is what everybody in the neighborhood's doing, and that's why this doesn't look out of proportion at all. In fact, it still looks, to me, a more spacious, grand residence.
The home next to me just went under agreement. It's 4 foot off my property line. If you look at number, I don't know what number Collier is, that house is 4 foot off of my property line. It's sold. They're gonna do a pre-existing condition, and they're gonna go up 35 feet high, 4 feet off my property line.
And I would grant you, if you had a Form A and you subdivided a lot, you could do exactly that.
I think one of the reasons why it kind of looks, like you're expressing this whole concept of two houses on a single lot, the space between the accessory dwelling and the main dwelling, Paul, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, it appears to meet the sideline setbacks. Like, in other words, if you were to draw a line between the two, you probably can have each meet a setback, right? It's much more. And so, I mean, and that's because we have the space on this lot. I mean, there's a lot of lots that probably are more crunched together, or, we make people crunch the houses together because there isn't as much space. So, we have the luxury of doing that, which is a blessing,
So I guess you're waiting for my vote. I would vote not to support.
Well, if that's the
Another
case.
comment?
Yeah. Michael?
I'm sorry, can I make a comment? Well, and again,
I need you to introduce yourself.
Michael Hayes, 43 Front Street, and
Thank you.
This is obviously a very interesting discussion. It's one we've had in this room many times. I was struck by what Richard had said earlier as to the clearly subordinate issue, which everybody struggles with. My view on subordinate is that it is secondary. It is of less importance to the main structure. But the question is, how do you quantify that? Well, I think when we're dealing with a bylaw, you first have to look for any clues within the bylaw itself. And I think Richard had said that the only thing we have in the bylaw is 750 feet or 40%. So I think that while not is rock solid, absolute, it is certainly, in my view, would be guidance to the board and to everybody who struggles with this issue. But to me, my opinion is clearly subordinate is, again, secondary or less important than the main structure.
Anybody else?
I do have one issue. If the intent when the bylaw was written was to limit the square footage, then it would have been written at the time. If the intent, back when it went from 50% to 40% through the discussion, if there was any intent whatsoever to limit the size of an accessory dwelling, it should have been addressed at that time. And if this board feels there should be a limit on it, then they should propose that legislation and bring it to town meeting and allow them to change it. But the bylaw remains the bylaw, and this is gonna come up again and again and again. And it's not fair to the residents to do this. We've been through this for, well, a year and a half through this process. By the time from the time we originally submitted the plans to our first hearing today, it's been nearly 18 months.
I grant you that. It's a long time. I think this was a issue that we talked about at the very beginning, and then there was a period of time when we were waiting And I think you had other things you had to get accomplished. So it's not 18 months. This has been the issue all along. It's not something we're making up. It's written in our bylaw. So to the extent that you don't think it applies, how many pieces in my bylaw don't I think apply?
But you can't tell me the square footage.
I don't think
What can I do
I can
different
tell
than
you what the
plan
square footage is,
that you
because
would
it's in
vote?
here, right?
What would appease you to vote favorably, because you appear, we haven't heard your straw poll vote, but what would appease you for a square footage? What is your definition? Or tell me what I would need to do as an applicant to comply with your definition of subordinate.
I think
you have an obligation, anybody who doesn't agree has an obligation to tell us square footage, tell us size, tell us volume, tell us something, rather than making me go and spend thousands and thousands to redo plans and hire engineers and hire architects, and it's not subordinate yet.
Right.
That's not fair, Steve.
And the plan, to be fair, the plan hasn't changed that much. It's still the same square footage it
If you look at the
was.
original plan,
So,
it was
and the
12
square-
feet higher.
And the square footage in the,
I actually have the original ones here. They've
Right.
done quite a bit.
still the same.
It's still the same
It's
square
not.
footage.
It's dramatically different.
No, you asked about square footage, and I'm saying it's still the same square footage.
It's reduced somewhat. I believe it's reduced by 50 or 60 square feet from the original.
I thought you said it was 1450 something.
It was 1490 something. It was more. It was reduced because we brought the eaves in and made the room smaller. If you look at the original drawings, it was dramatically larger than the drawing that's in front of
It
you.
has a total on it somewhere.
I thought they said this, when they started it was the same square
The
footage.
very first submission.
Essentially, it's the same.
Yeah.
But the volume's dramatically less because the pitch of the roof was changed.
It doesn't have an overall square footage. But
Yeah, we took away two of the garage bays. There were garage bays all around it, and it was sat 5 feet higher on the lot. We depressed it
right.
6 feet below grade, so it became a drive lower from the street rather than drive up into it, so it matched the driveway of the existing house. Which is the right way you build a barn. You drive in from the grade of the existing driveways. So that's why it would be 12 feet higher if it was done as a barn. And that was the original drawing. And we scaled it back, we brought it back, we made it smaller, we brought in the roof lines, we've reduced the square footage, and at no point in time through all of this process, through all of the architecture, were we ever told, make it 1,200 square feet, make it 1,300 square feet, make it 1,250 square feet. There's no limit. It's unfair to not tell me other than it's 40%.
So I do have the original proposal here was 1,478 square feet.
So it's gone down by 25 square feet. Right.
This was the this is the original application on April I think it was the original, on April 24th, 2013. That's what's stamped.
Yeah, that would have been the first one.
You know, I guess I'm kind of looking, and we talked about this. The first sentence, the sentence that deals with clearly subordinate, if you look at it, I almost think like the most important words for us to focus on when we're trying to figure out what it means are the words part of. Because it says the accessory dwelling shall be clearly a subordinate part of the single-family dwelling. And it doesn't appear to me like it's talking about, it doesn't appear to me that clearly a subordinate part, it doesn't say clearly subordinate, it says clearly a subordinate part of. It's not talking, that language, when you look at it closely, is not talking about looking at the size of the building. It's talking about what part of the accessory dwelling is subordinate to the part of the single family dwelling. I mean, It's a conundrum. It's a really, it's hard, but if you focus down on it, and then, again, you have the next sentence, if there's nothing defined in the bylaw, I mean, Mike's been before the SJC on statutory construction, he just talked about it, is you have a more specific sentence right after a general term that's in the same section of the bylaw. It's attempting to tell you what clearly a subordinate part of means. I don't know. It's I mean, I think that I almost think that the way it's written is not to even allow the discretion. It's just basically it is the next sentence or it's not. Like it's almost like it's defining what clearly a subordinate part of means. But
I think that's the crux of the issue here, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to look at
I actually agree with
whatever
that.
interpretation you have on it, but
there's no other area
no,
in the
we're
bylaw
in the
to
same
focus.
place, and
Yeah.
we've had this exact discussion on many accessory dwellings about
Virtually
clearly subordinate.
Virtually every
We're gonna have one in 2 weeks, too.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
See, you know, in section F, and this is what I have, looked at after our first meeting. Section F says that, first of all, when you read through these sections here, they don't differentiate between a single-family home versus, an accessory dwelling within a single-family home
Right.
and the accessory dwelling which is detached. Section D talks about an accessory dwelling associated with a single-family house must be located with the interior and the same roof. And then you get down to F, it says the accessory dwelling shall be clearly a subordinate part of the single-family dwelling. It says that it shall clearly be a subordinate part of the single-family dwelling. That's why I mentioned earlier this evening is if you were to put an addition onto this house, for example, and this was your accessory dwelling, and it's attached to the existing single-family house, then the outside features of that accessory dwelling would have to be similar or the same as the primary dwelling. And I believe that if you look at the definition of subordinate, it also says it's got to be smaller and similar. So in a case, when you read the bylaw, section F doesn't talk about the accessory dwelling being the subordinate of the single-family dwelling if it's detached. This is detached. This is part of the single-family dwelling.
To piggyback on that, with the section D that talks, the only section that talks about detached, the last part of it says, or in a detached structure on the same lot that complies with all required setback, building height, and yard requirements for a primary structure. So it kind of brings in this concept of the dimensional issues that we're talking about right there.
So where are you reading again? I'm sorry.
So if you look at D, it says an accessory dwelling associated with a single-family house. I can let you read it, but must be located within the interior of and under the same roof as a single-family house.
I couldn't hear you, Jeff. Can you wait?
So when you have provisions of special permit procedures and conditions, and it goes through A, B, C says only one accessory dwelling unit shall be created within a single-family house or on a lot containing a single-family house. And then it goes on to say D, that an accessory dwelling associated with a single-family house must be located, and then it goes on to say either within the interior of the structure, in a house attached thereto, and this is the part that matters, or in a detached structure on the same lot that complies with all required setback, building height, and yard requirements for a primary structure. So it's saying that the detached structure has to comply with all the dimensional requirements as if it were a dwelling, a single-family dwelling.
Yeah.
And it just kind of, again, it feeds into the general conversation, like more clues as to the fact that, this issue of, for lack of a better word, massing or volume is is actually contemplated somewhere else here in the bylaw. But
And I would say to Steve and Bill, is it, I think that we all may, or I shouldn't say, some of us have expressed that we don't 100% like this bylaw, or that there's some loopholes in it, or some vague language. I do think the onus is on us to make that change in that proposal, and I think it's unfair to sort of have a particular applicant, for lack of a better term, sort of held hostage to our not liking the bylaw. But
No, I don't think it's, the bylaw is what it is, so what we're trying to do is interpret what it says, right? And apply
That's
it.
the rules by which the game is played.
Right,
Right.
and
Well,
so,
that's
so I mean, that might be, a more compelling discussion than anything else I've heard so far, is this discussion about section D and how it's written.
ordinance structure. So,
I think you get your straw vote. The question is, what do you want to do now?
I don't know what we do, we don't. May I have a straw vote, please, just yes or no? Because I'm confused at the responses. Are you going to vote in favor or not?
Let me start. I would vote in favor.
I would vote against.
I would vote against.
In favor?
In favor.
well, you've left us with no choice. You've just voted for the alternative use. We're requesting that we'd like to withdraw our application without prejudice. You'll probably see us back here in about 2 years.
Less. As soon as it's built.
Okay.
So, I'd like the board to entertain a motion to withdraw without prejudice.
We have a request from the applicant to withdraw without prejudice?
Do we have a, probably not, right?
No, we didn't do that. We did approve, we did deny, we didn't do that one.
So I move that we rescind the application without prejudice.
Second.
The applicant's request.
Question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
What was that? Yeah, I'll send you a letter tomorrow. That's okay?
No, well, anyway, we can debate this till the cows are.
I think that's the problem.
To me, I guess all I have is this.
That's all I have to.
But I guess the thing is, we're interpreting it differently.
I think we are, yeah.
It's the
true.
same
And
discussion
I'm
that's
open
come
to
up.
other interpretations of some of
As
these.
Mike said, it's coming up again in 2 weeks.
Legislative record on it or something like that, but
Okay, the next item,
we don't have that.
So it's, the word accessory.
anybody,
has some
Michael, what are you here
meaning
for?
too.
What are you here for?
Endorsement of the plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're here for a Form A.
Okay, fine. Introduce yourself and tell us what you want to do.
Okay.
This is the one for Village Lane. This is the little-
Yes.
little piece you give in the conservation.
Oh, all right, that's what.
Yeah.
My name is Robert Fastenal. I'm here representing the Clarks. Also with me is Paul Marafito, who put together a plan. Hopefully this presentation is going to be somewhat less controversial than the last, and the planning board doesn't find a major objection with our proposal. We're proposing basically to put together an approval not required plan that makes the existing lot, which is a 7.5 acre lot, into an 81,000-foot lot on Village Lane, and to create a 6-acre non-buildable conservation lot adjacent to it and behind it. And Paul, why don't you get into more of the description? Okay, what we've done on the plan is to, because the single-family house lot has just a 60 feet of frontage on the cul-de-sac, and what we did for access from the cul-de-sac back to the main body of the parcel, we show a proposed 8-foot wide easement for access. And you can see the wetland line right behind the house. That parcel is probably 99% wet.
Part of the Gulf River.
Yeah.
And it's going out to the river.
This is it.
Yeah, right. Oh,
So
Cohasset.
this is
I
the
didn't know that was the
easement
name
right
of
here?
it.
Yes, yeah. This
And that's
is-
access to this lot?
Yes.
Yeah.
They really can't walk in because it's all wetland.
It's all wetlands.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
The
right.
reason I did the easement was because we couldn't reduce the lot frontage below 60 feet.
Because I'm in a butter right over here.
Yeah. Wow.
This is on the
The
river.
bottom of sheets of railroad.
Yeah.
We lose Laura?
I didn't know it was that low through here. That's very interesting.
Yeah, when I was looking at the satellite picture, I'm like,
Any
oh, wow.
comments on it? I think it's a straightforward.
One, I didn't know it went that
Yeah, I
far
wanted
back.
to, in her,
And then two, when I saw this lot, I'm
her
like, wow.
Yeah,
comments, I
seen
thought
it.
she had somewhere, just a second.
Just so that the board is clear, what we're proposing to do is create this non-buildable lot and put a conservation restriction in perpetuity for conservation purposes, and to donate this non-buildable lot to Maxwell Trust or a similar organization if Maxwell Trust would not accept it or no longer continued in existence. It would go to something like the Audubon Society or the Trustees of Reservation. The homeowners are interested in selling the buildable lot and just making it a clear definition of what is the home lot that is for sale, create a separate deed, give it away to the Maxwell Trust or a similar organization, and put a conservation restriction on that separate lot that is in the process of being presented and approved by the state. It would also be presented to the Conservation Commission as well as the Board of Selectmen for sign-off so that that conservation restriction would remain in perpetuity.
Good. Do I have a motion?
Sorry.
Oh, yeah?
I was going to pretend to be Laura for a second and just say, but it's basically what you just said. I move to approve, under the law not required, a plan of land in the town of Scituate, Massachusetts, 35 Village Lane, stamped by Paul Joseph Marabito, registered land surveyor of Ross Engineering Company Incorporated, for applicant Emily J. and Daniel M. Clark, dated June 26, 2014, as the division of land shown on the plan is not a subdivision because it shows a proposed conveyance or change in lot line which does not alter the existing frontage as required under the Scituate zoning bylaw.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank
I'll
you.
sign these later tonight, pick them up probably.
Thank you for creating a conservation area here too.
Let's give it to the town.
The herons will be happy.
It's actually a conservative,
That's
it's a
your,
conservative lot.
there you go.
Better than being a liberal.
So I need one more.
You need me to back?
Oh, he's got it.
Oh.
I got it.
All right.
Lost my agenda.
We did the Form A, we have,
Let's do the endorsement of flexible open space, or do you want,
That's what we're there for.
we can do, if that's just signing it, we can be adjourned for that, right?
Well, you have to actually make the motion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
and this was based on the selectmen change, what was the reasoning behind, there was something about like it went to the selectmen but then came back?
That's the acceptance of the open space.
Is that, okay.
Yeah, there's a whole new policy that's coming down where the selectmen want to be looking at these open space parcels and deciding, do they want them, do they not want them, do they want them for open space, do they want them for something else?
Don't we forward copies of all of your subdivision plans to the Board of Selectmen?
Yeah. But that's like, no comment.
I wasn't suggesting a comment, I was just reconfirming what I thought I already knew.
Yeah.
So I just so I understand what we're doing here, we're just basically reiterating that the open space plan, the declaration of easements?
What you're doing now is you're voting to endorse a plan so it can be recorded, and before it gets endorsed, you have to receive a covenant saying that the infrastructure will be built, or else they'll put up some surety. And hopefully you can get that out of what we've written in that motion.
Okay.
And I have that with me. Signed, that covenant.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also that there haven't been any
I thought you meant
appeals.
you had the surety with you.
Oh, no, the form.
Yeah.
It's his briefcase full
Yeah,
of cash.
exactly. Okay.
Large brown envelope.
The planning board has received a covenant dated July 10th, 2014 to secure the construction of the way and installation of municipal services. Other conditions prior to endorsement of the plan have been met. I move that the planning board approve and sign the declaration of easements, restrictive covenant, and that the planning board endorse the flexible open space development subdivision plan for White Ash Farm Lane at 305 Country Way.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Do we have anything else we need to do?
Yeah, you've got,
Bills.
Minutes and accounting. So I move that we approve the Scituate Planning Board minutes for June 26th, 2014.
All those in favor?
Aye. Second.
Oh, I can't vote on this, can I?
Oh, were you not here?
I withdraw my vote.
You date that. That's that.
Okay, great. And we have a whole bunch of bills.
Okay. So I guess I'll do all these in order. So I move that we approve $240 to Image Resolutions for the two mounted 2014 zoning maps that were that are used in Town Hall. $595 to Chesia Consulting for the engineering peer review for 50 Country Way, the definitive subdivision plan. $116.58 to Gatehouse Media for the legal ad in the Scituate Mariner on June 5th and June 12th for 345 Hatherley Road accessory dwelling special permit. $308.40 to Armory Engineers for construction inspections for Blanchard Farms, June 1st through June 30th, 2014. $438.48 to Armory Engineers for the construction inspection services for Benjamin Studley Farm, June 1st through June 30th, 2014. Again, Armory Engineers to the construction inspection for Dreamwald Estates at Kobe's Run, May 1st through June 30th, 2014. $735 to Murphy House, Toomey and Lehane, LLP for the legal review of Blanchard Farm subdivision documents. $997.50 to Murphy Hess, Toomey and Lehane, LLP for the legal review of the flexible open space development subdivision for Benjamin Studley Farm.
You have enough money to pay for all that?
Actually, and this, we already signed, so I'm
We've already
assuming,
approved it.
okay.
All the rest of them we've already approved.
Okay, and then, so that's it.
I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
So, let's have 3 signatures here for these. Pass this down.
Stephen, this is a thing for the registered signature.
Picking you up later than I thought I would, Michael.
Keep going to bed earlier and earlier.
Oh, I'm going to sign it twice?
Yep. Okay, great, thank you.
I always say that it's Amory. I always say Armory, but it's Amory Engineering.
Amory,
Right.
yeah. It is. Hey, Laura, I have one for you. You know, on the reports that you give every 2 weeks to the department heads on development, when you're talking about the architectural firm that's doing the Gates project and also the public safety building, it's Dorr and Whittier. You don't have that correct in the write-up. You have it Whittier and Dorr is D-O-R-E.
D-O-R-E.
Yeah,
Okay, thanks.
that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Obviously doesn't change the meaning, but,
Well, Mr. Dorwitz likes it.
yeah, John Dorr would appreciate that, as would Don Walwer, actually.
Oh, all right.
Walter, excuse me, Don Walter. I know another Don Walter.
Okay, sure. That way, well, if you're not sorry, you can leave.
That's the last one.
It's D-O-R-E?
D-O-R-E and Whittier, yeah.
Okay.
We need 3, we need 5.
3.
Great.
All right, speed this up.
That's it.
So 3, 1, 2, 3.
It's interesting that they only 7 planning boards.
But then there's, I just wonder if they went...
351?
But did they make presentations to all those planning boards?
I don't know. They got a lot of other, like mayors.
And,
Right, and
planning-
Well, look at the,
Planners and all
look at
that.
the organizations on the front page.
Yeah.
BSA, AIA,
Right.
Trustees of the
COA.
Reservation,
Yeah.
Audubon Society. I mean,
Whatever works best for you.
Yeah, what surprised me is they only had 7 planning
Yeah.
boards
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
entire state.
Okay, do we have the town planner report?
No, we'll let it go.
All right.
Okay, Bob's got a motion. Do I have a
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned.